is the wall politically, and is it worth a government shutdown?
The wall is important not only politically, but in every other way imaginable. It's important. It has to get done. Look, President Trump is not saying he wants to shut down the government, but he's saying this is the top priority. He's got to get it done. So we're going to get it done. And Congress has the ability to not only appropriate funding for this right now, but Congress has the ability to make Mexico pay for it right now. And so if Congress doesn't want to pay for it themselves, make Mexico pay for it. That's fine. But build the wall.
Mexico doesn't seem interested in that. But all of that aside, Aubrey, a lot of voters do place other things like infrastructure and tax reform higher than the wall. How important do you think that it is?
Well, one of the reasons I voted for Trump as well was the promise of building a wall. And, you know, I live in San Diego, and there's a lot of talk down there about sex trafficking going into Mexico, rampant drugs coming through Mexico up in San Diego. So I have two boys, 8 and 6, and I worry about that for them. Now, I will say this, that getting Mexico to pay for this wall, I mean, it's kind of a stretch. I mean, there's got to be some middle ground there that we can get this done.
Did you think that while he was running and saying Mexico would pay for it? Kind of like, eh.
Well, I mean, he says a lot of things, but
yeah.
and I believe he really wants to get all these things done. And one of the reasons I voted for him was because, you know, he says what he means. I've always been a kind of guy, when I say something, I mean it. And you don't always have to, like, kind of tiptoe around what he may be thinking. You know what he's thinking, right? And he wants to get this done, and I'd like to see it get done.
Chuck, can I ask you this? I was just going to ask.
Yeah.
You said that Congress is in the position to make Mexico pay for it. Can you just walk us through what that would look like kind of specifically?
Yeah, and I say that because right now it's not fair that hardworking American taxpayers have to fund the cost of the illegal immigration that comes over, which is estimated by many sources to be over $100 billion a year, over $1 billion a year just for Arizona. So Congress has the ability to impose the BAT, the Border Adjustment Tax, which they've already talked about. There's $24 billion a year that flows down into Mexico. There's obviously fees that goes through, you know, the money transfer services. There are fees that can be placed on that. And you also have 1 million visas that are issued to Mexicans every year that come here. Those fees can be increased. There's different ways that Congress right now could make Mexico pay for the wall. Obviously, Mexico isn't going to want to pay for the wall, but this can be done. This was all spelled out, too. If you remember back in the campaign, people kept asking back in the campaign, well, how are you going to make them pay for it? And as a campaign, we released this plan that shows these different ways. And the media actually dropped the topic right after because they realized, wow, that's actually real. They can make Mexico pay for it that way.
Well, Jason, we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about actually having a bill where it's in the budget, where taxpayers do pay for it.
And the House of Representatives has already passed this bill out. It's now in the Senate's hands. We're talking about $1.6 billion out of a $4 trillion federal budget. Yeah. And so for the president to say, hey, you know what, this one's real important to me, and I'm not going to let this go through without, he has this moral imperative to get it done.
Ebony, I believe border security is very important, obviously. I think that there could be other ways to do it, less expensive, and look at cost-benefit analysis, maybe ending some of the welfare incentives, that we could save money that we spend on that, and then also not have that incentive and decrease it. Other ways to look at it. Do you think that we could look at something like that, or do you think wall, need the wall?
Well, look, I agree with you, but we're not in the Oval. The truth is, you know what I mean? Like, I think that sovereignty is important, border security is important. I think the rhetoric that President Trump has had that's been so strong on the issue has already seen a positive decrease in terms of those undocumented illegals, whatever you want to call them, coming over here. But, again, he was elected. President Trump was elected. That was, I think, his primary mandate going into the Oval. So I'm not going to really criticize President Trump for moving forward with a very plainly, clearly stated agenda item.
And by the way, we don't need to shut down the government. I think Paul Ryan's right. But that's in the hands of the Democrats in the Senate. This is not up to Republicans as to whether or not they're going to shut down the government. It's up to the Democrats as to whether or not they're going to let this go through. And it being such a small budget item.
I don't know if Jeff Flake's going to vote. I mean, I think there are a couple of Republicans.
I think Jeff Flake clearly said that he was in favor of securing the border. He voted for a 700-mile fence in the past.
But he also talked a little bit about a wall not being the best option for Arizona.
But I think, look, there are different ways to surveil the border. And you want to be able to see through that because you want to be able to see what's happening on the other side of that fence. But some places you physically need different types of surveillance, the drones, those types of things that can see what's going on.
Sure.
And then just enforce the law. You got to enforce the law. We don't do that in this country.
I agree.
And when you talk about obstruction from Democrats, Aubrey, a lot of Democrats have supported things like fences on the border in the past, including Hillary Clinton. Do you think that some of this is just not wanting to support something because it's President Trump?
Well, Certainly, I think, a lot of issues that's going on right now, it's very easy to blame Trump. A lot of things that have been bothering people in the past, ironically enough, all this statue stuff that's going on right now. Where was all this complaining 8, 10 years ago? Now, all of a sudden, Trump's in office. It just seems very convenient. So,
I think the Charlottesville thing really set that off, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah. But, the whole border wall, one of the, piggybacking what you said, one of the biggest reasons most of America, half of America at least, voted for him was to get this wall done. That was one of his big campaign promises, and he wants to follow through on it. He's trying to follow through with it.
Yeah, he is. He absolutely is. But, the shutting down the government, it's something that when he talks like that, his supporters, they love it. They think it's talking tough. But politically, everyone else might not be such a big fan of it.
No, but I do think that's that disruptor spirit that, again, for the, at least 50% of the Electoral College and then some that voted for him, I do think that plays well. I think that reinforces the notion that he's not afraid to go outside the box, go outside the political norms, if that means enforcing the mandate that he was elected around.
You better have him do it now and tell him in advance of passing the bill rather than get the veto at the very end. So I think he's doing the right political thing to do.
If I could tell you on the math of that, the cost they say to build a wall would be about $20 billion. And the Congress that likes to give away trillions says, oh, that's a lot of money now. But the savings is we spend over $100 billion a year on illegal immigration. So if we can spend $20 billion to save $100 billion a year, that's like me saying, hey, Jason, give me $20, and I'm going to give you back $100 a year forever after that. That's a great investment on its own, even if we paid for it. It's a great investment, and it has to get done.
I'll give you the $20 in the break if that's okay.
You got it.
Yeah, do you think that it will come to a shutdown?
I don't think so. I don't think so because I think Congress realizes that President Trump is for real, and they need to come around. He's the president, and this is a big priority for him, and they have to deliver. So I think Congress is going to, in a game of chicken, I wouldn't go against